Time once again for Community Forum, and we're very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Jason Osgood. Jason Osgood is a candidate for Washington Secretary of State, and he has been on the show before representing Washington citizens for fair elections. Jason, thank you very much for spending time with us this morning.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here. And may I just say that what you do here every Saturday morning is fundamental to our democracy. I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you do and bring citizen radio to the airwaves. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So start out and tell us, why are you running for Washington Secretary of State?
So I've been involved with a watchdog group for a number of years now. I helped co-found Washington Citizens for Fair Elections, and there are two reasons that have compelled me to run for Secretary of State at this time. Washington Secretary of State is our state's chief elections officer. This person is responsible for protecting our democracy. You know, it's a very important responsibility, and I think it's the most important responsibility in our government, because without the fundamental right to vote, we lose all the other rights. And he's done two things. My opponent has done two things recently that have scared me as a citizen and compelled me to run. The first one is he has put a barcode on our ballots that allows government officials to determine how we voted each and every time. And this is an unconstitutional act. We have a protection in Washington State's Constitution for a secret ballot. So the incumbent has violated our voter privacy. And that's just simply unacceptable. That's unconstitutional. It's un-American. The second reason that I'm compelled to run at this time is the incumbent has been championing, promoting, and certifying the computerized voting machines that we know are flawed. And he's been ramming them down the throats of the counties in Washington State. All the reports show that these machines have problems, and this is my technical expertise. I'm a professional software developer. I understand computer security issues, and we need to make, as your Secretary of State, if I'm elected, I will make the vendors either shape up or ship out. And so those are my two big reasons. There are many others.
All right, let's start out then with the machines that we're having problems with. Talk more about that. Are those the Diebold machines?
Diebold has renamed themselves. They've rebranded themselves Premier Election Systems. They're still fully owned by Diebold. And just a funny aside, I'm campaigning across the state, and these individuals in Eastern Washington, they're like, what's the name of that company? Is it Diebold? Is it Diebold? And one lady says, no, I think it's Diablo. And I'd not heard that before, and I thought that was pretty good. And the problems with the machines stem from the fact that the election administrators fundamentally protect the vendors. So in 2002, in response to the election fiasco in 2000, we had a crisis situation, very much like Naomi Klein describes in Disaster Capitalism. So they created this crisis situation, and then they had a huge pot of money to give out, $2 billion. I think, they increased the amount of money. And so you had this turf grab situation where the vendors that got product to market quickest got the largest market share. And so there was this headlong rush to get everybody new computers without really any kind of insight or foresight or inspection or introspection. And so these machines came onto market too quickly and in a haphazard way. And the consequences of that is the machines are unreliable. They haven't been properly vetted. And what's even worse, and really troubling to me, is that all of the independent reviews of these machines have shown fundamental security flaws and reliability flaws and functionality flaws. For instance, like the reason we have the machines is so that the disabled community can vote in private. However, the machines don't actually permit that. The one reason we're getting the machines, supposedly, and it doesn't fulfill that function. And so these machines have been proven to be flawed. And yet we're still getting them. And in King County, interrupt me anytime. And so in King County, the situation is, King County is the epicenter for the battle for citizen oversight of our elections. We have everything that happens in or in the United States of America and for elections happens here first in King County. We're a huge county. We were the first to get the optical scan machines from Diebold in '98. And these were also rushed to market, and they were actually provisionally certified by the Secretary of State before they could be properly vetted. And then there was about a 4-year shakedown period before the machines settled down and were used well, or could be used properly. And what has happened in the last 2 or 3 years is, as the touchscreen machines that everyone's familiar with, that don't record your votes and lose votes and et cetera, and flip votes, as those machines have fallen out of favor, the jurisdictions have been pushed to go to mail balloting, and some places go all the way to all mail balloting. And so this is another crisis opportunity for vendors to push their schlock down our throats. And in King County, we call it the Reckless Plan. And the details of the Reckless Plan are at recklessplan.org. That's a very clever name, I know. And there was many components to it, but the most fundamental component was that Diebold was giving us their 3rd generation ballot tabulation machines that were involved in election meltdowns in other jurisdictions, in Scotland and the UK. And we would be the first customer in North America to use these machines. And one of the really bad aspects of these machines is it would take away the ability to do a manual recount. So we would be reproducing all of the problems with the touchscreens with the central count of the mail ballots. Citizen participation, citizen oversight, the ability to do manual recounts would be eliminated by having these new machines, and they're very expensive. And through our watchdog efforts as citizens, Washington Citizens for Fair Elections, we successfully got many aspects of the Reckless Plan stopped. And so in King County, we prohibited the use, through Dow Constantine, Councilmember Dow Constantine, prohibited the use of that unique barcode that identifies your name on your ballot. That's no longer permitted in King County. And that legislation is now the model legislation that other citizens are using in the other counties in Washington state. We also got them to delay the purchase of a number of software aspects, and we've got them to delay the use of these machines. They wanted to use all of these new systems right before the November 2008 election. There's so much going on. We're going to have record turnout, and they wanted to change everything about our elections at the most critical time. It's unbelievable. That's why we called it the Reckless Plan. And so our group successfully stopped that, and many of the decisions are now being reconsidered and will probably be tabled due to our efforts.
So did I understand you right, where this 3rd generation, they had already tried to push these or had these in other countries, and then they thought it was so successful, we're going to bring it to the States here?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I went to the public demonstration of the new, the Secretary of State refers to it as the high-speed ballot tabulator. Well, it works pretty well for documents that have not been folded. Well, mail ballots get folded in the mail. Otherwise it's too big to sit in an envelope. And so I've got video footage from the demo where they're running mail ballots through, and the ballots jackknife in the machine. And so then they have to stop it, take out the paper jam, restart it. It's like, so what's high speed about this? I didn't understand. And the response from King County Elections and the Secretary of State's office has largely been, oh, there's nothing to see here. There's no problem. Just some crazy activist, crying wolf again. It's like, well, yeah, but I have video,
And wasn't we've both been following this for a while.
Yes.
I know you've been following it a lot longer, but I mean, recount, wasn't that like that's been one of the key issues from a citizen standpoint for quite a while? And you're saying on this current generation, their response is to completely eliminate that.
And it's infuriating. So it's, we're treated as outsiders. I see a couple themes dealing with the election administrators. One I already mentioned. The election administrators are completely dependent on the vendors that supply them the gear and also do the ballot printing and other production things. And so if the vendors make a mistake, like, print the ballots wrong or late, or, accidentally do a software upgrade, there's a cover up. There's, no problem here. Don't worry about it. The other thing that we see is that the election administrators protect their own. This aspect is not a partisan issue. Everybody believes that election integrity and fighting over the election systems is partisan. Somehow it's left versus right or up versus down. That's not the case at all from my experience. What happened in King County 2004 is King County elections misplaced boxes of ballots. They just lost them. And then it's Christine Gregoire, the Democratic candidate, now the governor, had to pay for a manual recount. So, they did an inventory, they found the missing boxes, and then they counted all of the ballots by hand, right? That step should not have been necessary. And that kind of, double check, any ability to audit would be eliminated by the use of these new systems. And we have a fundamental right to observe how our democracy works. I mean, it's us. It's our democracy. It's our elections. It's the consent of the governed. And if the citizens can't watch how that works, then we don't have a democracy. And the way that the new systems, it's a little bit technical and arcane, but they would transfer the images of the ballots into a database. And then when a recount occurred, they would retabulate the database. And so we would not be able to audit that machine. We would not be able to do a manual recount.
Could you foresee then making that basically, once the info comes in from the database, I guess there's a balance there between people having a private ballot, but
right.
somehow making the database available, like an open source, open code?
There are two ideas that are circulating around, and one I'm a big champion of is every piece of software that is sold to government, the vendor has to supply the source code to an escrow. Okay, I work in the software industry, and this is what we do for our customers. It is the customer's guarantee that if you go out of business, they're not hung out to dry. This is fundamental. It's in state law for every system except the exception that is given to election systems. I don't understand why the citizens don't have the opportunity to see the software and how it's run. And this is unacceptable in every other domain. It's the systems that we do. My day job is electronic medical records. Very sensitive, many of the same issues as with voting: security, auditing, identity, privacy. We have to take care of all of these similar things. So Washington State also has those one-armed bandits, the betting machines, casino machines. I'm sorry, I'm actually not directly familiar with them. I don't gamble. That's why I want election integrity. And our gambling systems that are used at the casinos, their software is in escrow. You can look at that software. Everybody can inspect it, and they're licensed and identified. I don't understand why the same standards are not applied to our election systems. The second idea that is rattling around, and it's counterintuitive why this isn't, why it doesn't bear out as a good idea, is that the ballots should be a public record. That after an election, the public should be able to review the ballots. From an election integrity standpoint, that sounds like a really good idea. However, that collides with voter privacy. If you can look at all the ballots after the election, then you can use data crunching and infer how everybody voted, just through a process of elimination and telltale signs. And our elections fundamentally are very simple. You vote in private, you make your little circle, and you drop your ballot into the ballot box. And then at the end of the election, or end of election day, those ballots are removed from the ballot box, under the watchful eyes of observers and, mutual suspicion and checks and balances, and then they're counted, right? And as an election observer, as a poll inspector, as a poll worker, as a politician, a candidate, you can watch that entire process. That's very easy to describe. It's very easy to understand. It's what was in use for, it's about 100 years. And any step that we take away from that is an assault on our election integrity. Every time that you replace a human with a computer, you're taking away some portion of the election administration from citizen oversight. And I hope that was a good answer.
So do you think it's possible to have a system, and obviously we're going to use computers just because of the number of people we have in this country.
Absolutely.
But so is it possible for a citizen to, after an election, create a system that they can check and look at their vote and go, yes, that's how I voted, and somehow know that that is being tabulated into the big picture?
Right. That is also a complicated question, because if you can prove how you voted, you're opening the door to election fraud. Because then you can coerce voters, you can buy votes, you can, same issue arises with having a receipt for how you voted, that you can walk home with. And the system that we have, or have had, where you vote in private and you count in public, that is the best compromise to reduce the amount of voter fraud and election fraud. And this is battle tested. This is 100 years old. Everyone's done it. It's called the Australian ballot system. But there is something that the citizens have been asking for, and there's been great reluctance in providing. And that is mandatory random audits of the election systems, because we will never be able, the size and the complexity of our jurisdictions now and the complexity of our ballots, we need to have computer tabulation, in some capacity. That's a choice that we made in our democracy, is that we have all these issues on the ballot, and it's not practical to count them by hand at the end of the election day in our jurisdiction. And so what, the checks and balances that can be put in place is a mandatory audit where they're, randomly select, depending on the size of the jurisdiction, a certain amount of ballots that are manually recounted. Right now, we don't have the ability to audit our central count election systems in Washington state. There is no audit. There is no cross-check. The only person that can ask for that is a candidate. The citizens have no rights. We actually tried to do that last year, and we wanted to manually recount 3 precincts from a special election. And King County elections, 3 precincts, so that's about 600 votes. King County elections was going to charge us citizens $25,000. It's incredible. And this is a fundamental right of citizens overseeing their elections, is to be able to audit the system and make sure that it works correctly.
All right. So getting back to the your issue with barcodes, so you have been so far successful with getting King County
Yes.
to change that. What is the prospect in the other counties? I mean, you said you made things available, but
This issue was actually raised by 2 citizen watchdogs up in San Juan County. And, it's a county of, I think, 15,000 people, or 15,000 voters. And so it's a very modest-sized county. And they noticed that they had a new feature at their county website where they could look up to see if their vote had been counted. And it sounds like a pretty good idea. You can call and verify that your ballot's been received, that your ballot's been counted, et cetera. And they found a couple problems with this. They started looking up the status of their neighbors' ballots, which kind of feels uncomfortable. And then they hit refresh, and the answers changed. And then they went back and checked again, and the answers changed again. And so the answers continued to change. It's even past election certification. And so, I'm a computer geek, and I have to tell you that I trust everything I read on the internet. Right? So if the election people are publishing this stuff on the web, why would I trust that more than the paper audit trail? It's like you can print whatever you want. That's not proof. That's like a claim. And, oh, by the way, I need to give credit to the 2 citizens, Alan Rosado and Tim White. And so since 2005, they've been opposing this, and they brought it to the attention of the rest of us and nationally. And they have a lawsuit against the Secretary of State Because, I mean, the lawsuit's really clear. The Constitution says this is illegal. You can't do this. And so they'll win this lawsuit, and we will eventually have these barcodes banned from Washington state, but it will take a while, and their resources are finite.
I assume Sam Reed was the person that did this?
Absolutely. Thank you. Sam Reed has introduced this system to Washington state. The vendor of the system used to be called Vote Here and is now called, ironically, the Election Trust. And this contract was awarded by the Office of the Secretary of State in a no-bid contest for the mail-in ballot tracker. And it was pretty much crammed down the throats of the county auditors. Some of them resisted. And then when the money ran out, it's unfortunate that the good-intentioned money, the HAVA money, Help America Vote Act, which was to enable the disabled community the right to vote in private, was misused to buy this no-bid software from a crony of Sam Reed's. And so that's a that's a company in Bellevue. And it's currently in use, and I believe this unique barcode is on the ballots of 25 counties, so over half of our counties.
So clarify, you've got Diebold, which changed its name to Premier Election Systems.
Or Diablo.
Or Diablo, depending on your whether you like them or not. And then you've got Vote Here, which changed their name to the Election Trust. So I'm not clear on one produces the machines. What does Vote Here, the Election Trust, produce specifically?
So they sell the software. It's part of the voting system that is supposed to allow, I'm sorry, I should have explained this better before. They sell the software that tracks your ballot from production all the way through tabulation. So they tie that unique barcode on that ballot to your name. And they wave their arms. They call it monkey motion. That's a technical term in the software industry when you're doing a lot of activity but no real work. And so they use cryptographic systems cryptographic systems. And it's jargon meant to confuse and confound you. They still have your name on your ballot.
All right. Talk a little bit about the move that it appears most counties have done is to mail in ballots.
Right.
Should we be worried about that, the removal of physically going in and casting our votes?
Right. I have two statements about mail balloting. The independent studies that have looked at the error rates for voting systems have concluded pretty conclusively that the most secure, accurate way to vote is to go to a poll site, use a poll ballot, and have it counted at the precinct. Okay, so I use a poll ballot. I'm a poll inspector. I help other people vote. My second statement on mail balloting is that it is about voter choice. If you want to use a mail ballot because you have to, perhaps you're in the military, you're disabled, you're a business person that travels a lot, you just don't have the time, then that is your choice, and I fully support that choice. But if you want to vote at a poll site, that's also your choice, and I support that as well. And we have a similar issue with the top two primary system that the Office of Secretary of State is fully embraced, is that is an issue about voter choice. They misrepresented the top two primary system. They said this is a replacement for the blanket primary. It will improve or increase voter choice. That was bait and switch. What the end effect of the new top two primary system will be is a reduction in voter choice. Come November, you will not see as many choices on that ballot as we have had in years past because of the winnowing, the culling of candidates that will happen in the upcoming August primary. There's one other issue that I'd like to touch on. We're running short on time. Is that okay? So Sam Reed, my opponent, the incumbent Secretary of State, the Secretary of State has been a Republican position for over 4 decades. So he's in a long line of people doing these kinds of activities. He bragged that he deleted 400,000 voters from the statewide voter registration database. And I personally find that alarming. And he says that it's not biased, that it's by the book, and et cetera. And if that's so, then why do the Republican candidates think that it will benefit them? And maybe there is malintent, maybe there isn't. We're looking into it. We're doing the analysis to find out if there's intrinsic bias to that. But it seems to me part of the third theme that we've seen both locally and nationally, and that is a systematic reduction in voting rights and voting choice. And so in 2005, the Secretary of State tried to do a backdoor purge of the statewide voter registration database by comparing the voting records against the Department of Motor Vehicle records. And so if you've had your name changed, you're disabled, you don't have a license, you would be removed from the voter rolls. And it's just a arcane bureaucratic thing, but the end result is that people would be removed. And there's this big push for voter ID nationally. Hey, everyone should have a driver's license. Well, that would disenfranchise 10 million people. And they tried to do it here in Washington State. And the Washington Association of Churches sued and stopped that activity. There's another backdoor purge that's occurring. And it's an indirect consequence of the three strikes law, is that ex-felons are not, or felons are not allowed to vote in Washington State. And they can get their voting rights reinstituted by following this really arcane system. So about 15,000 convicted people lose their right to vote every year, and only 500 are able to restore those rights because of the gates. It's the ACLU has put up, and JusticeWorks has put up this flow chart of how to restore your voting rights. It's really complicated. It's like 16 pages long. Nobody knows how the system works. And it's impossible to administrate. And so consequently, 14,000 people are not having, roughly every year, are not getting their voting rights restored. And so it's like this slow drip, drip, chip, chip away at voting rights. And voter choice is being eroded. And then the ability of citizens to oversee our elections has been constantly chipped away. Like I said earlier, when you replace humans with computers, when you have all these arcane rules, like the new King County Elections Facility down in Renton, you can observe the elections. They call it the dog trot. It's the hallway around the center, or around the perimeter of the building, where you can look into the center through a glass wall. It's like, how is that citizen oversight? I can't even see that far. I need binoculars to see how the votes are counted. And this is the third theme that I've seen in my watchdog activities. So the election officials protect each other, the election officials and their high priesthood, and they're very offended whenever they're asked questions. The election officials protect the vendors who they're totally dependent on for everything. And the third is the constant chipping of our voting rights and voting choice.
Very quickly, so that 400,000 names that were purged, can citizens look at that to find out who was purged?
We're working with the state party to get the data sets. The Secretary of State now has the authority. It's part of the HAVA from 2002. They administer the statewide voter registration database, and they release data sets. And so we're trying to bring all the data together to do the analysis, to figure out who was purged, and to see if there was any bias. It's a very difficult activity because the data quality is really bad, and which also is a pretty bad indicator of the Secretary of State's command of computer technology. I'm just going to use the word. The data sets are garbage, and we have to do a lot of cleanup just to see what has happened. It's another barrier to citizen oversight.
And if you were Secretary of State, would you do that in a public fashion so people could see whose names were being purged?
Absolutely. I would make most of the documents and reports generated from certifying elections and maintaining the voter registration database public by default, canvassing board reports, ballot accountability sheets. These documents should be searchable on the web up to the point where it would infringe on voter privacy.
All right. Talking with Jason Osgood. He is a candidate for Washington Secretary of State. And how can people find out more about your campaign?
That's a really good point. Thanks. My website is jasonosgood.com, and all of my contact info is on the website. For instance, my email address is info@jasonosgood.com. And thank you so much for having me back on your show. This is a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.